What if I told you that a single phone call could reveal that your deceased mother had been lying to you for 40 years, and that lie was worth more than most people make in a lifetime? Michael Thompson was 30 minutes away from donating his mother's jewelry collection to Goodwill. The appraiser's phone call changed everything. What he discovered wasn't just valuable, it was evidence of a secret that shattered everything he thought he knew about his family. By the end of this story, you'll question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The date was March 18th, 2023. Michael Thompson sat in his childhood home in suburban Denver, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the overwhelming task of sorting through 43 years of his mother's life. Dorothy Thompson had passed away 6 weeks earlier from complications related to diabetes, leaving her only son to navigate the painful process of deciding what to keep, what to sell, and what to let go of forever. Michael, a 49-year-old insurance adjuster, had taken 2 weeks off work to handle his mother's estate. The house felt impossibly quiet without Dorothy's constant humming of old hymns or the sound of her soap operas playing in the background. Dorothy Thompson had lived modestly her entire life. She worked as a school secretary for 32 years, raised Michael as a single mother after his father abandoned them when he was just 7 and never seemed to have much money left over after paying the bills. Michael remembered countless nights when Dorothy would sit at the kitchen table with a calculator, stretching every dollar until the next paycheck arrived. She drove the same 1994 Honda Civic for 15 years, bought generic brands at the grocery store, and always told Michael that expensive things were for other people, not for families like theirs. The jewelry box sat on Dorothy's dresser, exactly where it had been for as long as Michael could remember. It was an ornate wooden box with intricate carvings and a small brass key that Dorothy kept in her bedside drawer. As a child, Michael had been fascinated by that jewelry box, but Dorothy was always careful about when she opened it. She would only wear certain pieces on special occasions like Christmas morning or Easter Sunday, treating each item as if it were made of glass. When Michael asked about the jewelry, Dorothy's answers were always vague. She would say things like, "These belong to your grandmother," or "I've had these since I was young," but never provided specific details about where the pieces came from or how long she had owned them. Now, staring at that same jewelry box, Michael felt a wave of nostalgia mixed with the fresh grief of losing his mother. He opened it slowly, expecting to find the usual collection of costume jewelry and sentimental pieces that most people accumulate over a lifetime. Inside, he found exactly what he expected to see: a pearl necklace that Dorothy wore to church every Sunday, a pair of diamond earrings she saved for weddings and funerals, a gold bracelet with small emeralds that she wore on her birthday each year. To Michael's untrained eye, the pieces looked nice but not particularly valuable. They were the kind of jewelry you might find at a department store or receive as graduation gifts. Michael's plan was simple. He would donate the jewelry along with most of Dorothy's clothing to a local charity. It seemed like the right thing to do, honoring his mother's memory by giving her belongings to people who could use them. Dorothy had always been generous with others, often volunteering at the church food bank and donating clothes she no longer wore. Michael thought she would have appreciated knowing her jewelry might bring joy to someone else. He carefully placed each piece back in the jewelry box and set it aside with the items designated for donation. 3 days later, Michael's girlfriend Sarah suggested he get the jewelry appraised before donating it. Sarah worked as a real estate agent and had seen situations where families unknowingly gave away valuable items during estate cleanouts. She convinced Michael that a basic appraisal would take minimal time and might provide useful information for tax purposes if the jewelry had any significant value. Michael reluctantly agreed, more to satisfy Sarah's curiosity than because he believed the jewelry was worth anything substantial. Michael took the jewelry box to Harrison Fine Jewelry, a small shop in downtown Denver that had been recommended by Sarah's colleague. The shop was owned and operated by Robert Harrison, a certified gemologist with over 25 years of experience in jewelry appraisal and authentication. When Michael walked into the shop carrying his mother's jewelry box, He expected the appointment to last maybe 30 minutes. He planned to get a simple written appraisal stating that the jewelry had minimal value, complete the donation paperwork, and move on with settling his mother's estate. Robert Harrison greeted Michael with the professional courtesy of someone who had handled countless estate jewelry appraisals over the years. Michael explained that his mother had recently passed away and he wanted to get her jewelry appraised before donating it to charity. Harrison nodded understandingly and asked Michael to place the jewelry on a black velvet cloth spread across his workbench. As Michael began removing pieces from the jewelry box, Harrison's demeanor remained casual and businesslike. He picked up the pearl necklace first, examining it under a jeweler's loupe with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen thousands of similar pieces. Then Harrison picked up the diamond earrings. His casual examination became more focused. He set down his loupe and reached for a more powerful magnifying glass. He studied the earrings for several minutes, turning them over and examining the settings from multiple angles. Michael noticed that Harrison's breathing had changed slightly, but he didn't think much of it. Harrison then moved to the gold bracelet with emeralds, and this time his reaction was unmistakable. His hands began to tremble slightly as he examined the piece under increasingly powerful magnification. Harrison set the bracelet down and looked directly at Michael with an expression that seemed to mix confusion, excitement, and concern. Harrison asked Michael where his mother had acquired the jewelry. Michael repeated the vague explanations Dorothy had always given about the pieces being family heirlooms passed down from his grandmother. Harrison listened carefully, then asked if Michael's mother had ever mentioned anything specific about the jewelry's history or origin. Michael explained that Dorothy had always been reluctant to discuss the jewelry in detail, treating the pieces as precious, but never explaining why they seemed so important to her. Harrison nodded slowly, then asked if Michael would be willing to leave the jewelry overnight for a more comprehensive examination. Michael agreed, though he was beginning to feel uneasy about Harrison's behavior. The appraiser seemed increasingly agitated as he continued examining the pieces, and Michael couldn't understand what was causing such a reaction to what he assumed was ordinary jewelry. Harrison gave Michael a receipt for the items and promised to call the following day with his findings. As Michael left the shop, he noticed Harrison immediately returning to his workbench and pulling out additional equipment he hadn't used during the initial examination. The next morning, Michael's phone rang at exactly 9:15 a.m. It was Robert Harrison, and his voice carried an urgency that made Michael immediately alert. Harrison asked if Michael could come to the shop as soon as possible, preferably within the hour. When Michael asked if there was a problem with the appraisal, Harrison's response sent a chill through him. Harrison said there wasn't a problem with the appraisal, but there were some things about the jewelry that Michael needed to understand before making any decisions about what to do with it. The tone of Harrison's voice suggested that whatever he had discovered was far more significant than a simple valuation. Michael arrived at Harrison's shop 45 minutes later to find the appraiser waiting with what appeared to be several reference books, a computer with multiple browser tabs open, and a phone positioned as if Harrison had been making calls. Harrison invited Michael to sit down and explained that he had spent most of the previous evening and early morning researching the jewelry collection. He had also contacted colleagues in New York and Los Angeles to verify his findings. What Harrison told Michael next challenged everything Michael thought he knew about his mother and their family's financial history. The pearl necklace that Dorothy had worn to church every Sunday was not costume jewelry. It was a strand of natural saltwater pearls, each one perfectly matched and graduated in size according to traditional jewelry standards. Harrison estimated the necklace's value at approximately $47,000. The diamond earrings were not department store jewelry either. They featured two flawless, colorless diamonds, each weighing just over 2 carats, set in platinum settings that showed the craftsmanship of high-end jewelry manufacturing. Harrison valued the earrings at $62,000, but it was the gold bracelet with emeralds that had prompted Harrison's urgent phone call. The bracelet contained 7 Colombian emeralds, each one of exceptional quality and size. The gold was 18 carat, and the setting showed evidence of hand craftsmanship consistent with luxury jewelry production. Harrison's initial valuation of the bracelet exceeded $115,000. Combined, Dorothy's jewelry collection was worth approximately $224,000. Michael sat in stunned silence as Harrison explained that his mother had been wearing jewelry worth more than most people's houses to church every Sunday for decades. Michael's first reaction was disbelief. He insisted there had to be some mistake, that Dorothy could never have afforded such expensive jewelry on a school secretary's salary. Harrison gently explained that he had triple-checked his valuations and consulted with other experts to confirm his findings. The jewelry was authentic, valuable, and showed signs of being well-maintained over many years. Harrison asked again if Michael's mother had ever mentioned anything about the jewelry's history or how she had acquired such expensive pieces. Michael began recounting everything he could remember about Dorothy's explanations regarding the jewelry. She had always said the pieces belonged to his grandmother, but Michael realized he had never seen photographs of his grandmother wearing any of the jewelry. Dorothy had also mentioned that some pieces came from before Michael was born, but had never been more specific than that. Michael admitted that his mother had been secretive about many aspects of her past, particularly the years before Michael was born, and the circumstances surrounding his father's departure from their lives. Harrison suggested that Michael might want to research his family's history more thoroughly before deciding what to do with the jewelry. He also mentioned that jewelry of this quality and value often comes with documentation, certificates, or other paperwork that would provide information about when and where the pieces were purchased. Harrison recommended that Michael search his mother's belongings more carefully to see if Dorothy had kept any records related to the jewelry. That afternoon, Michael returned to his mother's house with a new sense of purpose. He began searching through Dorothy's personal papers, looking for any documentation that might explain how she had acquired such valuable jewelry. Michael started with Dorothy's bedroom, going through her dresser drawers, closet and bedside tables more thoroughly than he had during his initial sorting. In the back of Dorothy's sock drawer, Michael found a small manila envelope that he had overlooked during his previous searches. Inside the envelope were several items that made Michael question everything he thought he knew about his mother's past. There were 3 jewelry appraisal certificates dated from 1983, 2 years after Michael was born. The certificates valued the same pieces Harrison had examined, but they showed much lower values consistent with what the jewelry would have been worth 40 years earlier. There was also a receipt from a high-end jewelry store in Chicago, showing that Dorothy had purchased the diamond earrings in 1982 for $8,700. For a single mother working as a school secretary, spending nearly $9,000 on earrings represented an enormous financial sacrifice or suggested access to money that Michael couldn't explain. But the most shocking discovery was a savings account statement from 1984 showing a balance of $63,000 in an account Michael had never heard of. Dorothy's name was the only name on the account, and the statement showed regular deposits of significant amounts throughout 1983 and 1984. Michael found additional statements showing that the account remained active until 1991, when it appeared Dorothy had withdrawn the remaining balance and closed the account. The amounts of money flowing through the account were completely inconsistent with Dorothy's income as a school secretary. Michael spent the rest of the day searching through every document, photo, and personal item in Dorothy's house, looking for additional clues about her financial history. He found more evidence that Dorothy had access to substantial amounts of money during the 1980s, including receipts for expensive purchases and documentation of investments that would have required significant capital. Michael also discovered that Dorothy had owned several pieces of real estate during the 1980s and 1990s, properties that she had sold before Michael became aware of his family's financial situation. As Michael pieced together this hidden financial history, he realized that Dorothy had deliberately concealed her wealth from him throughout his childhood and adult life. She had chosen to live modestly while possessing assets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Michael couldn't understand why his mother would have hidden such wealth, especially during times when their family struggled financially. He remembered nights when Dorothy worried about paying bills, yet she apparently had access to substantial savings and valuable assets. The next morning, Michael called Harrison to share what he had discovered about Dorothy's financial history. Harrison listened carefully as Michael described the appraisal certificates, receipts, and bank statements he had found. Harrison then shared something that made the situation even more complex. During his research of the jewelry, Harrison had discovered that pieces similar to Dorothy's collection had been linked to estate sales and auctions involving wealthy families during the 1980s. Harrison suggested that Dorothy might have acquired the jewelry through legitimate means, but the circumstances of those purchases might explain why she had been secretive about owning such valuable items. Harrison recommended that Michael contact an estate attorney to help navigate the legal and financial implications of discovering such valuable assets. He also suggested that Michael might want to have the jewelry reappraised by additional experts to establish a complete record of its value and authenticity. Harrison warned that owning jewelry of such value carried insurance and security responsibilities that Michael needed to understand before making decisions about the collection's future. Over the following days, Michael continued searching through Dorothy's belongings and discovered additional evidence of his mother's hidden wealth. He found documentation showing that Dorothy had maintained investment accounts, owned rental properties, and made substantial charitable donations throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. The total value of assets that Dorothy had owned or controlled during her lifetime exceeded $500,000, yet she had chosen to live as if she had limited financial resources. Michael also found a series of letters that Dorothy had written but never sent, apparently intended for him to read after her death. In these letters, Dorothy explained that she had come into money during the early 1980s through circumstances she described as complicated and difficult to explain. She wrote that she had chosen to live modestly because she wanted Michael to understand the value of hard work and not rely on inherited wealth. Dorothy had planned to reveal the truth about their family's financial situation when Michael reached age 50, believing that would be an appropriate time for him to inherit and manage substantial assets. The letters also revealed that Dorothy had been supporting other family members and making anonymous charitable contributions for decades. She had used her wealth to help pay for Michael's college education, though she had never told him the money came from her personal assets rather than loans and scholarships. Dorothy had also established a trust fund for Michael that would have been activated when he reached age 55, but her death had accelerated the timeline for him to discover her financial secrets. As Michael processed this information, he struggled with feelings of anger, confusion, and grief. He was angry that Dorothy had allowed him to worry about money throughout his childhood and adult life, while she possessed substantial wealth. He was confused about why his mother had felt the need to maintain such an elaborate deception for so many years. Most of all, he was grieving not just the loss of his mother, but the loss of the relationship he thought they had shared, based on what he now understood had been fundamental dishonesty about their family's circumstances. Michael also grappled with the practical implications of inheriting valuable assets he had never known existed. The jewelry alone represented more money than Michael had ever imagined owning, and the additional financial assets Dorothy had accumulated meant that Michael's inheritance was substantially larger than he had anticipated. He needed to make decisions about insurance, storage, taxes, and long-term management of assets he was still learning about. After consulting with an estate attorney and financial advisor, Michael decided to have the jewelry collection professionally photographed and secured in a bank safety deposit box. While he determined his long-term plans, he also began the process of identifying and consolidating all of Dorothy's financial assets, a task that proved more complex than he had expected, because Dorothy had maintained accounts with multiple institutions and used different variations of her name on various documents. 6 months after discovering his mother's jewelry collection, Michael had gained a fuller understanding of Dorothy's financial legacy and the reasons behind her secretive approach to wealth management. Through additional research and conversations with Dorothy's longtime friends, Michael learned that his mother had received a substantial insurance settlement in 1982, following an accident that had killed his father and severely injured Dorothy. Rather than viewing the money as a windfall, Dorothy had considered it compensation for trauma and loss that could never truly be repaid. Dorothy had chosen to invest the insurance money carefully and live off her salary as a school secretary, allowing the insurance settlement to grow over time while maintaining her independence and work ethic. She had also used portions of the money to help other accident victims and support causes related to traffic safety, contributions she had made anonymously because she didn't want recognition for spending money that represented her family's tragedy. Michael ultimately decided to keep his mother's jewelry collection, both for its financial value and as a connection to Dorothy's hidden strength and complexity. He began wearing his father's wedding ring, which had been part of the jewelry collection, and gave Dorothy's pearl necklace to Sarah when they became engaged. Michael also chose to continue some of Dorothy's charitable giving, using her wealth to support causes that would have been important to both of his parents. The experience taught Michael that families often carry secrets that shape their decisions in ways that other family members never understand. Dorothy's deception about their financial situation had been motivated by love, trauma, and a desire to raise her son with values that couldn't be purchased. While Michael wished his mother had trusted him with the truth earlier in his life, he came to respect the complexity of her choices and the sacrifice involved in living modestly while possessing substantial wealth. The jewelry that had seemed like simple family heirlooms revealed a story of resilience, generosity, and a mother's determination to protect her child from both poverty and the potentially corrupting influence of unearned wealth.